A cardiologist testifying in former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's trial just lent a bit more of damning testimony against the defense. In fact, Dr. Jonathan Rich, retained by the prosecution as a heart expert or a cardiovascular expert, said that there was absolutely no evidence that drugs played a significant part in the death of George Floyd. In fact, here is some of that trial. Take a look.
Let's turn to methamphetamine then. What role do you feel that methamphetamine played in Mr. Floyd's cause of death?
I feel it played no substantive role at all.
And why is that?
All considering it was a very relatively low level of methamphetamine in his system. And so when you look at the context of the case and you see a relatively low level of methamphetamine in the context of everything else, I felt very confident that that low degree of methamphetamine was not what was triggering this profound cardiopulmonary arrest and ultimately PEA arrest.
All right, so that's pretty important. So this is in direct response to Chauvin's defense, who argued that Chauvin's actions did not cause the death of George Floyd. In fact, Chauvin's lawyer, Eric Nelson, claims that, no, it didn't have anything to do with the knee in the neck. No. This was all George Floyd's fault for having heart disease, high blood pressure, and doing drugs. Is that it? It didn't have anything to do with the knee in the neck. Didn't have anything to do with the knee in the back. No, drugs, and that's it. See? Well, okay. But that's not right. In fact, Rich also testified that he saw no evidence that Floyd died due to a pre-existing heart condition or from an overdose of fentanyl or methamphetamine, two substances that were present in Floyd's system at the time of his death. In fact, the level of methamphetamine that was in his system was apparently incredibly low. So, interesting. Now, he also said this: I can state with a high degree of medical certainty that George Floyd did not die from a primary cardiac event, and he did not die from a drug overdose. Like several of the doctors who testified during the trial, Rich said that he believed Floyd died as a result of asphyxia or a low level of oxygen. In fact, Rich testified that Floyd died from a cardiopulmonary arrest caused by low oxygen levels. Those low oxygen levels were induced by the prone restraint and positional asphyxiation that he was subjected to. That, of course, matches the testimony of the pulmonologist that recently testified that the positioning of George Floyd, like the knee on his neck, the knee on his back, the pavement, all of that basically squished him to a point where breathing normally was almost impossible. It basically testified that it was like trying to breathe through a straw. Okay? So basically, when Floyd was saying, hey, I can't breathe, well, it turns out he was telling the truth. He was struggling to breathe. And eventually, at a certain point, there wasn't enough oxygen going to his brain and to his heart, and it shut down. And that's it. He was telling the truth. It wasn't drugs, wasn't a heart condition. He had the life squeezed out of him by an officer that didn't give a damn about him. So much for protecting and serving. Okay. In fact, the next question here is when he talks about that. So take a look.
So Dr. Rich, then, taking into account all of the evidence that you reviewed, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Mr. Floyd's death was preventable?
Yes, I do.
Would you tell us what that opinion is?
Yes, I believe that Mr. George Floyd's death was absolutely preventable.
Preventable. Absolutely preventable. And also, during that, he outlined moments where Chauvin and other officers could have saved his life, if they actually cared, by repositioning him or initiating chest compressions, or just getting off his goddamn neck. But that's not what happened. In fact, when Floyd was struggling to breathe, the officers considered that to be resisting arrest and continued to keep the knee on his neck, on his back, despite the fact that he was handcuffed and subdued. Had the officers or medical personnel given any sort of care, George Floyd would be alive right now. Full stop. And whatever you think about George Floyd, know that he was murdered by a police officer. End of story. Derek Chauvin played judge, jury, and executioner for nearly 9 long minutes. An eternity if you can't breathe. Anybody who's ever had a panic attack or any sort of close call knows that time feels like it starts to stand still. Okay? It feels like it slows down. And all you feel is sheer terror. George Floyd felt this for about 6 minutes until he passed out, until he died. Okay? All as a result of Derek Chauvin, who absolutely refused, to get off his damn neck. Despite the fact that, again, Floyd was restrained and he was being compliant. Again, only trying to move in order to be able to get air into his lungs because of the sheer terror and the agony that he was in as he was being slowly asphyxiated to death. A horrible, awful, unimaginably cruel death over a $20 bill. That's it. It's over. It's over. It's open and shut. Every single defense Chauvin has used has been systematically deconstructed by scientific evidence, by these experts that have come in to tell us about the human body and the effect of what Derek Chauvin and the other police officers had done to George Floyd as he was laying on the ground. The only reason to ignore it is that you had never given a damn about George Floyd's life. And people like that do exist, by the way. People out there will make up things to excuse this horrible death because of, I don't know, whatever reasons. Money, pandering to a crowd, clicks, all that stuff, or racism. All they see is a black face with a troubled past, and they think, well, obviously, I don't care the details. He just had it coming. I hope the jury can look at the evidence that has been presented and come up to what I believe is the right conclusion. That Derek Chauvin did murder this man and deserves to have to pay for that, for taking his life. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.